Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, where you'll find insight, analysis, and the story behind the numbers.
Hello and welcome to a new edition of State of Economy podcast. Today we have with us Mr. Ravi Loonkar. He's a senior finance professional and an expert in the field of resolution, stress resolution to be particular. Mr. Loonkar has seen through a lot of ups and downs in all of his career, has ensured that many companies have come back to health, and he's also seen a few go down the drain. Today with us in the State of Economy podcast, he talks about the instance at Go First, what this would mean for the entire ecosystem from a resolution perspective, from an industry perspective with respect to whether aviation fares are going to go up, whether the modalities of operations may change a little, and what it also means to the ecosystem in terms of whether we would see more companies come forward to declare themselves as insolvent to ensure that the rest of the companies in their group doesn't suffer because of one person's misdoing. Listening. And let's get started straight away. Is this something that sort of came to you as a surprise? Going concern declaring itself as a bankrupt entity to cut its losses short?
There are quite a number of cases where the companies have been taken to NCLT for insolvency resolution and they were going concern. If you see of the top 12 cases which were referred, quite a number of them were operating. So to that extent, this is not distinct, but it is distinct in the manner that it has not committed any default to the financial creditors. Unlike other cases which were already NPAs, this is to that extent unique that till the date of filing the application for initiation of CRP, the company has not committed any default to any financial creditors. There is Section 29A, which debars the promoters of the companies which are NPA for more than 1 year. So this particular provision is not applicable in this case.
Okay. But do you see this as setting a good precedent for the sector from a financial health perspective as well? When a company expects strain, rather than the entire unit going weak and crumbling under pressure, let's cut the arm and the leg which is causing the trouble and keep the other entities at least as strong going concerns.
Well, I think it's a smart move in the sense that it won't, as a group, it would not affect if it were NPA and then it was referred. If the banks have taken it to NCLT, it would have a different connotation. So to that extent, yes, it's a smart move. But I would also like to state that it's not that because they have not committed the default, so the company was not in problems. In fact, if you see their financials, etc., it was facing losses for quite a number of years. It was rating was sub-investment grade. There have been also application which has been filed by one of the operational creditors earlier and in NCLT for initiation of CRP, etc. So it's not the reference was made at early stage. Probably there was a realization that at this point of time, there were not any other option. And that's how, as a last resort, maybe they have referred it for insolvency resolution. In fact, that has been stated by their CEO also, that the twin objective is one, to protect the assets of the company, and secondly, he has stated that the idea is to seek resolution.
But what I'm sort of still trying to figure out in my interactions with bankers is that they're not in entirely agreement. Of course, it doesn't matter whether they agree or not in this particular case, but they don't entirely agree the action that the company has resorted to. Their contention is that an account which has been standard in our books, unnecessarily we are going to be burdened with having to take provisions, all of that hurting our financials, etc. So from a bank's perspective, how would you call out the implications of Go First going towards insolvency?
Like what I've stated, Hamsini, that though the account might be standard in their books, but it's not that was not under stress or it was at a very early stage. So, and technically, the application under Section 10 could be filed by the corporate debtor. So, to that extent, it is I would say, it can't be questioned. And it's not a question of, that morality and all that actually. Like what I've stated, that they have reached a stage where probably there were no other options for resolution actually. And that is why they have made this reference. So far as the provision, etc. are concerned, yes, it would entail, provision to be made by the banks and all that. And in any case, their realization of their dues, etc., was facing problem. So far, by infusion of funds, etc., that could take place. But the company was not generating the funds by internal accruals, etc. It was not in a sort of self-sustaining mode. I mean, that's something which has to be accepted.
So whatever is the financial hit, they have to go ahead and take it. They don't have a recourse. And from what you say, the lenders, unlike in earlier cases, cannot quite make a reason out as to why they should oppose this move. Did I understand that right?
That's right. Lessors have stated that they have fraudulently or initiated this process so that, possession of the aircrafts, etc. cannot be taken.
Yes.
But NCLT considered this aspect also, and they were of the view that the fact that the company has committed a default is beyond dispute. And that is what is required. So it's not that just to take undue benefit of the system, they have made the reference actually.
Okay. So you would call it fair and square.
I mean, prima facie, the reference per se is technically and legally correct. That's how I would put it. Rest all, when, things go forward, one will get to know more.
Right. How do you see the sequence of events unfolding from here on? We had the administrator come in and say that the pilots will be paid adequately. If things go fine, the next logical process would be to find a buyer or find investors in it. So how do you expect over the next 6 to 12 months the whole go-ahead drama to unfold?
First thing, Hamsini, is that DGCA has already issued them the show cause notice stating that why they have suspended the operations actually and have directed them not to accept fresh bookings.
Right.
So that is going to be the first and foremost, challenge which has to be addressed.
Right.
That they will have to convince them the reasons and also whether they can resume the operations actually. So they will have to convince DGCA.
But wouldn't resuming operations also in some sense mean that they will need an additional line of funding possibly from banks? And what we've seen in the past is that once an entity slips into this sort of an insolvency or a tricky position, banks stop funding, banks stop the channels of funding. So how is the money really going to come from? Where is the money really going to come from?
You are right. I mean, so the challenges are enormous actually. And so, but this was the first one which I have stated that seeking, if at all, they would like, and which they have stated, of course, that they would like to resume the operations. But this is going to be the first challenge to convince the DGCA that they can run the service efficiently without interruption. So that is something which they will have to convince. The confidence of all the stakeholders, whether it is the customers or their service providers, everybody, those who are providing them the material, etc. So winning their confidence again would be a key aspect. Now you have asked about the funding part or that whether rupees 5 crore, which, the NCLT has directed the promoters to infuse or to provide RP for meeting the expenses. I don't think that 5 crore would be a sort of, it's...
For such a big entity, it's just going to be rounding off money.
In fact, the cost of continuing the operations are enormous. They have to meet the fuel cost, which is as high, which can be as high as maybe 25-30% of the total cost. They have to meet the MRO expenses, maintenance, repair, and overall expenses. Again, quite significant. I mean, I'm just stating the major heads, even, leaving aside the lease rentals, etc., for aircraft lease rentals, etc.
Right.
So the requirement of funds would be very huge. It would be significantly higher, though I'm not an aviation expert, but my view would be that even it could be as high as maybe 80-90 crore rupees per month actually. So that's going to be challenge. And the other aspect is that in this case, at least NCLT has acted very promptly, and that's something, which is remarkable. For admission of the company into CRP on 2nd, they have filed the application on 10th, case was admitted. So it's really remarkable. But otherwise, if you see the average time which is taken for those cases which were resolved, where resolution plan was approved in the financial year 22-23, that is just passed, was more than 2 years and 3 months.
Yes.
So it's going to be quite a long journey.
Yes.
And for long journey, whether they would be able to really, arrange funds would be going to be a major challenge.
Sure. And we've already seen one instance which came into NCLT, IVC. The whole bidding process happened. There was a new buyer at the other end, and still it has not really taken off. So do you believe that once an entity comes into here for resolution or for any sort of a mechanism, it's pretty much an open and shut case? Can life be possible after death for entities like this, or a rebirth be possible, if I can put it in a more optimistic tone?
The challenges are enormous. They have restricted even for carrying on the operations during this period is going to be used this thing. Then the company themselves have restricted that they have that dispute with Pratt and Whitney, which have supplied the engines, and the majority of their aircrafts are grounded today. The only 27 aircrafts are, running out of 51. And that dispute again is not something, it was there even in 2019, made certain claims, etc., for aircraft on ground and for engine problems, etc. And while there are reports that the P&W would also like to settle it out of the court and all that, the fact that it is like what I've stated, a dispute which is, long pending. So that would be a major overhang. But otherwise, the airline has been losing money from financial year 18 onwards. If you see, the figures which are available in DRHP when they have filed.
Yes.
So whether there would be any great interest from others, I'm not too sure about that, Hamsini.
I'll come to the most interesting question that everybody is sort of debating about. Can the existing promoters, the Vadias, look at retaining their control in Go First as it is today? Regulatory, I believe it is a very tricky, we'd be treading on a very tricky base to debate it. But what is your opinion of it?
Well, one is that legally, whether they can submit a resolution plan. Obvious, response is that yes, they are, entitled. More is from the commercial perspective, that whether it would make sense for them. That is somewhere where, like what I've said, though there are reports where they have stated that they are, they intend to resume the operations. And they are committed to revive the company. Like what I've stated, that viability of the company is currently obviously not there. To what extent financial creditors, the lessors, and other stakeholders, they are able to negotiate the deal and all that. It would, if at all, they submit their resolution plan actually, and it would be acceptable, to COC. Seems uphill task.
It does. It does. If you were to be in the decision maker's shoes, let's say as a banker, would you find fairness in what the promoters did? Perhaps this question is a little aside of what the regulations are, black and white, but how would you take a judgment call if the question were put forth to you?
Well, Hamsini, that morality has its own space, but in the business dealings, you have to deal with the situations as they exist.
Right. So do you see this as one more airlines going down the hill, and once again we are going to be left with the era of FS soaring to the sky?
Well, yes. Prima facie, I feel that it's going to be not so easy. It's not going to be easy, and it would have its impact. Like you have stated, that airfare going up, which already have, in fact, the premium which leasing aircrafts to India, that also there are reports, it would have its effect there. In case of another airline, there have been reports of repossession of their 5 aircrafts of SpiceJet. So yes, the implications would be there. My view would be that I would be a bit surprised if at the end of this whole process, the airline is revived and up and running. But like what I have stated, that this all would depend upon a lot of factors.
One last question, and let's wrap it up on this note. As and when this whole case progresses, as a professional who has years of experience in this arena, what would you think would be the 3-4 large takeaways from a borrower's perspective and from a lender's perspective from the Go First instance?
From lender's perspective, I would state one is that while the financial strength and support of the promoters is something which is always welcome, banks should see whether the business itself is viable on its own or not, and whether it can generate adequate cash flows. If it doesn't, then it is a risky proposition. In this case, again, what we find that there was security which was offered in the form of land and all that, which was quite, collateral having value more than 3,000 crore and all that. Nonetheless, today it is in insolvency, and undisputable fact is that there would be a hit which banks will have to take.
And one hit which they were not ready for because they had restructured this account back in COVID.
Yes, in fact, they have extended the emergency credit line guarantee scheme rupees 1,500 crore, of which 1,300 crore have been already availed, which of course was under that scheme. So, but nonetheless, they have extended significant credit facilities. Borrower's perspective, what one can state that, like what I've stated, that if anyone would wish that he can also participate in the resolution process, there are genuine reasons for default, for not being able to meet the commitments, service your debt, whether to financial creditors or to other operational creditors, etc., then it's better to take it at an early stage.
We don't have too many instances of solvent businesses voluntarily declaring bankruptcy. Like we said in the initial part of the conversation, to protect the rest of the group's interest. Do you see that with Go First, people will watch out for this space as well? Because it's not that the country has any less stress. Some of the stress is sort of getting marked up at various levels and just being ensured that we don't burst that bubble yet. Is this particular case going to set a decent precedent for what could come out of India Inc.?
Well, much would depend that which way this case goes. If it is resolved, then it would serve as a sort of precedent for others to follow. It could. But in India, what we observe is that the promoters would do everything, whatever is in their control, so that the account doesn't become NPA or is not taken to NCLT, etc. So it would require a kind of change of mindset rather.
I think the time taken for resolution and more importantly, whether the promoters end up owning the asset at the end of the process, those are two things which will be very critical in this particular instance.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. It was fabulous catching up with you on a topic like this. Look forward to another I shouldn't say opportunity because that could be bad for the country, but definitely an equally interesting topic to connect with you again. Thank you for listening in. We will come back to you very soon with another very interesting topic. But for now, it's your host, Hamsini Karthik, signing off.